Hi, and welcome to episode 27 of Socratic Satsang. Our guest today is the host of the Philosophy Podcast, Philosophemes. He's a PhD in philosophy, taught more than 100 university level courses in philosophy and psychology, has a background in mental health, set up a suicide prevention respite unit, authored 10 books, a person of great depth, fascinating person, in fact. Welcome, Dr. Frank Scalambrino.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here with you today. Thank you.
We're excited to have you. So, you've been called both a philosopher and a guide for aspiring sages. How do you generally introduce yourself?
Uh, you know, I really appreciate that question. We went a number of rounds trying to decide how to put an introduction together that would sort of immediately appeal to people. I don't know how I feel about the word sage, and so I put together an episode called "Should We Call Ourselves Philosophers?" But when people ask me nowadays, they say, "What do you do?" I tell them I'm a landscaper. So,
Oh, wow.
right.
I love
but
it.
but yeah, but you know, I guess I to do it some justice, I would say something like, really, I would call myself an existentialist, but I think that a lot of people could misunderstand that because they would think that that means that I'm associated with Jean-Paul Sartre, and
Wow.
so I would clarify that it's not just Jean-Paul Sartre. That when I say the word existentialist, what I really mean is a transcendental philosopher. But to call myself a transcendental philosopher, it's a little confusing sometimes. Um, so I would say that I'm an existential philosopher, though. Yeah.
Wow. Wonderful. Would you like to give us a bit of background about your journey, where you started out and how you landed? I mean, how you went through mental health and landed with philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I feel like I always was always drawn toward helping the helping professions and helping others, and I was just always sort of called to that. And at the same time, I felt as though I had some questions about, you know, what it means to exist, what it means to be, and why I exist. So
Wow.
I found myself. I started off in psychology, but I found myself really drawn toward philosophy. So I eventually left the mental health world and left psychology so that I could become a philosophy professor. So that's kind of, I guess, in general, the journey of it. I felt like when I was, there was the series of events where I thought that I was moving into spaces where I could help more and more people. And so I was hoping that by teaching philosophy that I was helping even more people than I was helping when I was the director of a crisis center over a couple counties in Ohio. Uh, so that was kind of the journey. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, lovely. Lovely, lovely. We went through this video you've posted on the tiers of philosophy. I found it fascinating. And can you walk us a little bit through that for our audience? And I have a question on that, but I'll come to that once you walked us through.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I I was motivated to put something together that would appeal to a large audience, and also, but more than just appeal to a large audience, that it would actually, be helpful in some way. I was genuinely trying to be helpful, and I I find that what I would call heuristics, right? So these little patterns that you can just, they're easy to remember, and then you can apply them, or you can, if you find yourself thinking about something in philosophy, you can check back with that little pattern to kind of orient yourself. And so I wanted to put, something like that together. Uh, that's why I call myself a transcendental philosopher, because I participate in a way of viewing reality and a way of viewing philosophy that I would say is a tradition that even Plato and Aristotle belonged to, but really it was clarified. It was a tradition that was clarified by Immanuel Kant. But so when you so to get to the point of the tier list video, I was trying to understand what are the different ways that we could relate to philosophy. What are the different ways that we could relate to the history of philosophy, and if we're doing philosophy or if we're reading philosophy, what are the different ways that we can relate to it? And it seemed like there were several different ways, ranging from just I enjoy philosophy quotes, which I do enjoy philosophy quotes, and just enjoy wondering about and pondering certain philosophy quotes. And then this idea that when I ponder certain philosophy quotes, or when I read philosophy or think about philosophy, I might find it to be therapeutic. And then sort of all the way up to what really was Plato thinking, what really was Aristotle thinking, and um, am I able to understand their thought enough that I can kind of see the world and see reality the way that they saw it. So that was like kind of the levels of sort of ascending these various relations to philosophy.
Lovely. Thank you. We will post a link to that video in our description and in our comments of this video for our
Thank you.
viewers. When I looked at it, I found myself in S and A. And thinking about it, I couldn't find a difference between S and A, because
Okay.
if I try to understand where they came from, I would naturally overlap into between the two tiers. So I was wondering if you could help us with that, with clarity. Oh, sorry, sorry.
Yeah, no,
With
that's a
clarifying.
great that's a great question. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah. So I
I'm
I
going to sleep
I
in the
guess
doghouse tonight. Sorry.
uh, no, that's okay. No, that's a really good question. I appreciate it. Let's see. Uh I think that the real difference. So I think that you're right that really the S level is like a combination of the A and B level, really. So I think in a way, I think you're correct
Thank
to
you.
point that out. And then I guess the only thing I would add to it is that it's just that the S level is maybe thinking explicitly in terms of methods and paradigms, whereas the A level, if I'm remembering this correctly, but the A level, uh, the A level would be a little bit more specific to um, the philosophers themselves. But maybe I'm actually remembering that incorrectly. So it's
Okay.
been a little while since I looked at the video. Yeah. But I remember the S level being paradigms and methods, and I find that often it's the case that even if we're, I mean, so for example, I started off by referencing Plato and Aristotle, and it's easier to communicate when you're referencing philosopher names as opposed to like the transcendental method versus the Cartesian method and that sort of
Right.
thing. But yeah, but I think that if we can get to the level of knowing why, for example, Descartes' method is incommensurable with, I've actually heard you say this in some of your content, Vin, that the Cartesian model is really something we want to transcend, right? And so the S level of that tier list would be something like recognizing why it's the case that the Cartesian paradigm is incommensurable with the Kantian paradigm, despite the fact that there are many things that Kant wrote that can be taken out of context to make it sound like there isn't so much of a difference, but they are technically incommensurable. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Yeah. I remember as we were watching it, I kept thinking, well, I'm a C student here because the part on therapy and how the philosophy and therapy, how they kind of interact tends to be, it's an area that I really love. But I appreciated that the part A or the tier A of really seeing something from someone else's vantage point. And one, I just think that that's something that we really need right now in our society, that capacity to be able to really see from someone else's perspective, especially how globally connected we are, all having different experiences, different cultures, different backgrounds. And I'm just curious, how is it that you kind of come in to see, like, from a philosopher's perspective? What are the steps you take in order to get to that place?
Oh, that's a great question, Kirsten. Thank you. Um, and I think you're absolutely right. One of the pathways, what I found for myself was, uh, because going from psychology to philosophy, going from mental health to philosophy, I very much was absolutely interested in the therapeutic aspect of it, and I think that when so if I can step aside for just a second and share a quick anecdote, I often say people say, what's it like to have a PhD in philosophy? And I say, well, the whole time that you're studying to get your PhD, everyone wants to talk philosophy with you, right? So everybody's like, oh, that's so interesting. What are you studying? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then as soon as you get the PhD, nobody wants to talk to you, right? No, that's okay. Well, let's talk about something else, yeah. But I feel like one of the things that happens is that you're sort of constantly in this process of defending the position that you put forward, right? So it's like, well, I think that this is therapeutic, and I think it's therapeutic in this way, and then people will say, well, what's the background to that, or why would you? How does that make sense in a larger context? And when you start being forced to answer those questions, right, that's whenever you start to get pushed into. It seems to be the case that this is how this philosopher saw the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Thank you. So I have a question that combines your background in mental health, psychology, and philosophy. My wife has ADHD. I am autistic. I have Asperger's, pretty strong on that. And so do you find a difference between the approach to philosophy by neurotypicals and neurodivergent people? Or is it just across the board? There's no difference.
That's a great question. So, if we go back and we look at the history of philosophy, they say things like there are plenty of places where people tell stories about Socrates, and one of the stories that that consistently is told is that he would have these raptures, right? And so people have gone back and they've said that they think that he had a seizure disorder. So
right, I've read that.
So
yes.
Yeah, so there's this interesting thought of like, if only they would have had Depakote, maybe we would have never had any philosophy. Maybe somebody else would have. So that's Socrates and Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant is in many ways the exemplar of OCD. They say that Immanuel Kant, that you could set your clock by Immanuel Kant. They said that he had a time of the day that he would go for a walk, and he would walk around the block. He had a time, there was just a time of day for everything. And so, when we look at that, we think something like, if when you really start to get into Kant's philosophy, right, there's this sense in which if Kant was not so obsessive, there's no way. I mean, there's just no way he could have laid out the philosophy that he laid out as clearly articulated as he did. And so again, so on the one hand, I'm saying something like, you know, I think this was the term you used, that there are neurodivergent individuals who are drawn to philosophy. And at the same time, I would say there are neurodivergent individuals at the heart of philosophy. Yeah. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
That's really, really powerful. Thank you. Another question is, are you exposed in any way to Eastern philosophy? Because personally, I'm not educated in Western philosophy. I know a bit just out of interest because I love reading and I've read and read and read, but I haven't gone through a formal, laid out syllabus. I've just done my own readings. Whereas when it comes to Eastern philosophy, especially Indian philosophy, it's
Okay.
something I've been exposed to right from childhood and read inside out. So, do you have any exposure? Do you see any differences between the two? Um, I'd love to know your views.
That's a great question too, Vin. Thank you. So, uh, wow, I'm being flooded with so many ideas, but let me say, so when you say, I think that the term you used was Indian philosophy. Are you are you specifically referring to, say, like Mahayana Buddhism or Hinduism or something like that? I mean, yeah,
I'm definitely referring to Buddhism. It's something I'm fairly well educated on.
excellent.
Hinduism, which includes the Gita, the Shiv Purans, there's several books there. So just to um, add some fuel to this fire,
Hmm. Hmm.
for example, I find that Western philosophy has deep thought in things like freedom, discovering the mind, discovering yourself, understanding yourself against society, uh, the context, a lot of things in context.
Hmm.
Eastern philosophy, especially Indian philosophy, is about peace. It's about attaining something. It's about
Hmm.
duty, and it's about karma.
Hmm.
So your views, please.
Yeah. So okay. So really, I've got two things to say about this. The one thing that I would say about this is that I was exposed to Zen Buddhism at a young age. Not as young as you were. I was exposed to Christianity, Catholicism at a much younger age. But around the time I was 18 years old, there was a group of Buddhist monks that had come by the college that Kenyon College that I was at in Ohio, and I was just. I mean, it was one of these sort of peak experiences, gestalt moments in my life. It really had an effect on me. It turned some lights on, so to speak. And so from that point forward, I have always really um looked into Zen Buddhism. But what I would say, so what I would say is something like this. And I some people might find this controversial, but I think that other people would think that this is a very straightforward statement. So when you think about, so I put it like this, is that I always say that I believe the Buddhists are, or that Buddhists are the original and the greatest phenomenologists to have ever existed. And so even when and Heidegger was friends with Suzuki, Shunryu Suzuki, and the author of many great works, but the one that always comes to my mind is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, and he's got some commentaries on the sutras as well that are excellent. Um, but so to my mind, I would say something like, if you get even just a general understanding of Buddhism, and then you look at some of these Western phenomenologists, or really, you know what? I'll put it like this. I would say that Buddhism is a transcendental philosophy. There it is, right? So it's all right there, But so Kant is really the person who systematizes transcendental philosophy for the West. And so when you're reading Kant and when you're reading Heidegger and when you're reading these phenomenologists, there is this sense in which if you have even just a general understanding of Buddhism in the background, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, you're just sort of filling in the picture, right? So yeah, I love Eastern philosophy. I'm probably not as well versed in Eastern philosophy as you are, but I love Eastern philosophy, and I also I love the you had mentioned the word duty and the idea to my mind the idea of a kind of character ethics or a virtue
Yes.
ethics. Yeah, and that's how I would refer to myself as well, as a character ethics person as opposed to a conduct ethics person.
Yeah.
um yeah, and so I think that when I think about Eastern philosophy and I think about Buddhism and I think about character ethics, uh, I also think about some of these samurai texts, and I just
Yeah.
find them to be so beautiful. Yeah, I just find them to be so beautiful. In fact, I right now I am listening to my audiobooks. The audiobooks I'm listening to are, and I just listen to it constantly. Anytime I have any free time, I turn it on, right? But so I'm listening to the Shobo Genzo by Dogen,
Okay.
the Shobo Genzo. Yeah. And I'm listening to, I always have Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind in there loaded up, but I'm also listening to, and I can't remember the author's name, but it is tremendous. It's fabulous. It is a book titled "What is the Dharma?" Yeah, just absolutely love it.
Oh,
Yeah, I love it. It's so good. Yeah, yeah.
I see.
Yeah. There's some fascinating things there. So
Yeah.
over to you.
Yeah. Well, you touched on like when the Buddhists came to your college, that was a big turning point. And I'm curious, along your philosophy journey, when there have been kind of these moments of big shifts, something that maybe changed the way that you saw the world, or where there were these paradigm shifts, and what that has looked like.
Thank you very much for that question, Kirsten. I appreciate that. So, I would identify two um, two other moments on this path, on this trajectory, and that is when I was teaching Plato, and I felt, you know, I was teaching in particular the Republic. I would always teach certain dialogues beside each other, alongside each other, and the Republic or excerpts from the Republic because it's very long, and the Phaedo. And so when I was teaching those dialogues, I just kind of felt as though, it was like looking at photos of a place that you believed was someplace you had never been, but as soon as you looked at the photos, you started to think that you were reminded of that place, that you had been there before, you were reminded of it. And so, teaching Plato really, I felt, it was when I was just first teaching Plato and teaching Plato a lot. I was teaching a lot of introductory philosophy courses that I felt as though I made the decision that I was like, I've got to go be a philosophy professor at this point. So I would say there's the Zen monk experience. There's the teaching Plato experience, and then the other experience would be when I was working on the PhD. Uh, and I would refer to this in terms of just transcendental philosophy in general because it involves both Kant and Heidegger, and that is, um, and I've always been a Nietzsche fan, so that's kind of the origin story of this. If you want to talk a little bit about that later, but when when you're going through the history of philosophy, you start to realize that there are these problems that everybody is kind of touching on and everybody is kind of working on these problems, and some people they just defer to other people's answers in regard to these problems. Some people try to clarify it or add to it or whatever, but you start to realize that there's these problems that are recurring throughout that these philosophers are working on throughout the history of philosophy. And once you start to see that, and the experience for me was I would be sitting and listening to lectures, and it would all of a sudden I would just start to hear. I would be like, "Oh, that's that thing again. That's that thing again." Like I'm not sure what that is, but I find that to be so interesting. And uh, anyway, the moment was when you finally get a grip on what um, really on what transcendental philosophy is, but when you finally get a grip on what Kant is saying, and or for example, uh, because what Kant is saying is exactly what Heidegger is using in Being and Time. So Kant is a great skeleton key. If you understand Kant, you can unlock all of those doors, and they are very complicated doors, but they will all unlock for you. And so when I finally got a grip on Kant, Goethe refers to Kant. He says reading Kant is like walking into a well lit room, and I totally agree with him. Suddenly everything just sort of lit up and became clear, and that was a moment, another one of those moments where there was just sort of no going back after that. Like it's just sort of like, oh, like yeah, you can't unsee it once you see it. Yeah.
Wow.
And what specifically, I mean, when you were looking and when you were reading about Kant and when there was that discovery, what for you, can you just describe that a little bit more to us, kind of what it was that clicked?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. That's an excellent question. So the way I would describe it is that uh, Kant is Kant provides the map, uh, the map of reality, that if you understand that map, then uh, whenever you're thinking about anything, you come to recognize that you're somewhere inside of that map. And so once you know that I am, as Heidegger would say, I'm always already somewhere inside of that map, then you just think to yourself, where am I at inside of that map? And then once you locate yourself inside of that map, then the sky's the limit, because you can attach all the philosophers that certain philosophers have commented on that part of the map, whether they knew they were commenting on that part of the map or not. They commented on that part of the map, and so then you can go through what those philosophers thought about that part of the map. And so you know and this kind of goes to that discussion. It's kind of like the tier list thing. I mean, really what I did with that tier list is exactly, it's a very Kantian move to say, let's take philosophy in general, let's take philosophy in particular, and then divide it into, its widest categories so that we can essentially exhaust it. But the other piece to this is that I would say is that so forgive me. I'm still on track here, but so the main problem with Descartes is that Descartes reduces a tripartite that Descartes reduces three pieces down to two, and this has had massive reverberations through the history of philosophy. And I would even go so far as to say that the most popular philosophy tends to defer to Descartes' worldview. And oddly enough, you actually find this even when you ask AI, if you ask artificial intelligence questions about philosophy, it will give you a Cartesian biased answer. And if you push back against it, it will then give you the correct answer, in my opinion. But if you don't know to push back against it, you can't get a non-Cartesian answer. It seems to me you don't get a non-Cartesian answer out of it. But so to put this in a very coherent and simple way to state it would be that whereas Descartes is focused on the mind and the body, the transcendental philosophers seem to be focused on, or the transcendental philosophers are focused on spirit, mind, and body. Yeah. And it's through spirit that I would say that it's through spirit that then you have the connection with the Dharma, you have the connection with the idea of a Buddha field, and so on and so forth. So when you to make sure I'm answering Kirsten's question, when you understand the map, you understand that and forgive me, I'll be very brief about this, but I get really excited about this. I'm sorry. So Aristotle has this idea, and when you read Aristotle, Aristotle's metaphysics is just it's a wonderful it's a wonderful hike. It's mind boggling at times. It's very very difficult to get through at times. But when you understand that Aristotle actually has some very contemporary concepts, but he didn't have names for them. So Aristotle's wonderful for doing that. Like he's uncovering these ideas, but it's kind of like, there's no name for this, but, so then he's trying to tell you what it is, but there's no name for it. But in a sense, he's talking about something that is gestalt. Right. He's talking about something that is more than the sum of its parts. And one of the ways that he talks about this is in terms of using ideas to make a focal point. So in a sort of Platonic way, I would say it's like you can see the triangle. We're moving out of the cave in the cave allegory, right? You can see the triangle, but you can also use the triangle to point at something, right? To point at something that is beyond perhaps what we can fully visualize with the powers of the embodied soul. So when you do that, then that's whenever you get into this question of, well, what am I? What is the question of my being? And if we are stuck inside of just a mind and body distinction, then we start asking myself, am I mind? Am I body? But the transcendental philosophers, transcendental is the word transcendental is shorthand for condition for the possibility of. So the transcendental philosopher would ask, what is the condition for the possibility of the mind-body distinction? And the answer to that would be what the mind body, what they point to. And what they point to is the self, but since that self is transcendental, since that self is, beyond the dimensions of the mind, it's more than the sum of its parts. It is beyond the dimensions of the mind and the body, that self is a no self. And then we're right back in Eastern philosophy, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I just love that. And I think that it has such implications for what for the afterlife and all of that sort of stuff. So
yes.
Yeah.
That's
Incredible.
beautiful. Thank you. That was really nice. Lots to
Can
think
see
about.
why you get fired up on it. It's good.
Lots to process.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So one of the reasons we started our podcast, I mean, there's several reasons, but one of the reasons was because we find that the society we live in today, is deeply divided. It's so deeply divided. It's not about what you've done, who you are, what all accomplishments you have, how you're contributing to society, what your character is. That's all secondary. Do you agree with me on my political ideology? If not, you're just a bad guy, whichever side you are, right? I'm not talking about left or right. I'm saying both are like that. And we find that as time goes by, each side is just digging in deeper and deeper. And this is fracturing society. We are unable to see the other side without vilifying them. So my question to you is, this situation that we find ourselves in today, is it a natural process and we have to go through it before we get to another side? Or should we be pulling back from this fracturing that we are getting into? What are your views on this?
That's excellent. So if I could take your statement, or your question, and I could divide it into a descriptive part and a prescriptive part, I would say,
Yes.
so I'd like to address the descriptive part first. But I recognize that the prescriptive part is the heart of it, perhaps. But I agree with you totally. I agree with you 100% on this. One of these questions of how did I get into philosophy, and I thought that was going to be a very, very simple question. But then when I started to think about it, I realized that the world was so very different then. So for example, when I started studying philosophy, the internet didn't exist. you know,
Right.
and yeah,
Same here.
and so so I mean that's a very very different world than the world we live in now, and I feel like the ease of information it has actually, there are very many negative consequences from the ease of information. Hey, I mean, I myself, I feel demotivated to do certain things whenever I know that the computer, can get it done in a second. There are projects. So forgive me, I'm straying a little bit, but I've got this still. So there are projects that I was in the process of working on, and in order to complete some of these projects, I have to, make purchases, I have to spend large amounts of time, and so forth. And so it's like, I'm in these projects sometimes for, easily 5, 6, 7, 8 years, 10 years, and so I'm like 4 or 5 years into a project, and then AI appears, right? And right, and I remember I was joking around with my buddy. He's a computer science professor, and I was just like, I have all these complaints about AI, but then I was like, hey, yeah, I should really go spend some time with AI. And once I started doing that, it completely demotivated me. I mean, because I was like, well, why would I spend the next 5 years working on this project when in 2 years it's going to be able to do it in 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the technology there's a lot of negativity that's coming out of the technology. My cat is coming to try to get a treat, I think. So
Perfect.
yeah. Hey buddy, how you doing? But so I think that the technology, when I first started studying philosophy, you had to go to the library. You had to go to the library to get a book out. I mean, it was just a very different world.
Yeah.
But so to answer your question, I think that it's the descriptive piece of it is two-part, right? And that is one. I know some people might think that this comment is a silly academic comment, but I don't think it is. I think it's accurate, and that is that I blame Descartes. Right? I think this goes back to right. It's that darn Descartes. He gave us the Cartesian coordinate system, and it's great, right? But I love my GPS, but so I really do think that Descartes. There are just problems that came out of the Descartes, and I think Descartes was actually, in many ways some people say he just straight up stole from the Italian Renaissance philosophers, and that he misunderstood Campanella, for example, Tommaso Campanella. But to answer your question, there is a way of thinking that comes out of Hegel, right? So this is after Kant, one of the many philosophers after Kant that really is working on Kant's philosophy, and a lot of people forget that. They forget that Hegel was a Kantian. But what Hegel does is Hegel interprets Kant in the light of certain Cartesian ideas. And so really Hegel marks a step backward to the Cartesian problems, in my opinion. And Heidegger says the same thing. Schelling says the same thing. Schopenhauer says the same thing. I mean, arguably you could read Kant in a way that Kant says the same thing, because Kant projects out and says, this is a mistaken reading of my philosophy. And then Hegel comes along and says, no, it's not a mistaken reading of your philosophy. It's the right way to read your philosophy, but it's not. But so the problem is that when you take this Hegelian philosophy and then it evolves into Marxist philosophy, the idea then is that everything is political, right? That everything is always already political, and that to not accept that everything is always already political is to somehow be controlled by the political or something like that. And I believe that's kind of the dominant position now. And so that's why, everybody, it seems to me, everybody wants to talk politics, and everybody wants to, see what it is that they want to see you through a political lens. And so, prescriptively, to quickly answer the prescriptive piece of this question, and I think that this is, I mean, this is such an important question for philosophy today. I mean, we're at the place now where if you use a certain color, people are going to prejudge you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so I mean, if I mean, it's gotten to be so complicated that if you use a word like I mean, sometimes I try to remind people, I'm like, hey, I'm an old guy. I mean, like, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know this new language. I'm trying. I'm not hostile. I'm not, but sometimes I just use a word and I don't know how politically loaded or charged it is. I mean, but people will hear something and then they will immediately pigeonhole you. They will
Yeah.
immediately think, I know everything that you think now, and I'm not going to listen to a word of it. You know what I mean? And that kind of stuff. And that's not conducive, I think, for growth. It's not conducive for genuine communion, authentic communion, and so forth. So I think it's a bad thing. At first, I was trying very, very, very much to walk the line for them, like, right, just how can I appease everyone, right? But now
Yeah.
I think it's like you can't do it. You can't do it. So I'm like, well, I gotta try to stay I got to do the content justice. I got to do the philosophy justice. I got to do the tradition justice that I participate in. And I'm sorry if people are offended. I hope that they can recognize that my character is such that I'm not interested in offending anyone, and that if I do offend somebody, I have no problem apologizing for it. I mean, I'm not here to offend people. I'm here to teach philosophy. I mean, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Really.
Thank you.
It was something just kind of triggered when you were talking about AI. I'm curious because I think with therapy and AI, this is something that is, people are wondering, can AI be a therapist, right? Ultimately. And where do you feel with philosophy? Could AI do philosophy?
That is a great question. That is a great question. So I have in the comments section of one of the videos, I got into this back and forth with a few different people in the comment section, and this they kind of drew this position out of me, and I really do stand by this. I really do believe this. Um, you know, so again, this is such a great question, but so I don't. Okay, so forgive me. Let me take a step back and just to kind of put a little bit of context on this, is that, you know, I became so excited about philosophy that, and sometimes in hindsight I think, come on, maybe I was a little too enthusiastic. I don't know, but but so I became so excited about philosophy that I was willing to make very significant sacrifices. Right. Like I was like, well, if I have to forego this, if I have to forego that, like I'm going to do it. Right. Like I am being called to this. I'm called to this. I will not turn away from this call. Uh, and yet at the same time, as I just said to you, now I'm in the middle of a 6-year project, and well, I'm probably more like 75% of the way through a six-year project. And, I just put it on the shelf. Just put it on the shelf. And
Wow.
so the reason being is because, um, so forgive me. I feel like this is actually kind of complicated, but I'll just put it this way, and hopefully, your audience, this will make sense to them. But my thought is something like this. It's not that there is some great mysterious question that AI will answer, and that then therefore that kind of annihilates philosophy, or is the death or the end of philosophy. I don't think that that's the case, but what I think is the case is that AI completely eliminates the work, right? It removes all the labor. And so, as to get into this Socratic midwife metaphor, right? That without the labor, what is the relation to the birth? What is the relation to the output, right? But I really do think that's so. So, for example, if you trace this back, you could say something like, well, you know, at one point in time, I got really excited about trying to document the the way in which all of the U.S. presidents died, right? Like, did they die of pneumonia? Did they die of whatever? And so right, this is like I want all my socks to match, right? So I went through the list of the U.S. presidents, and I did all this research, you know what I mean? And you figure, I mean, I don't know, I was really young, but I'm sure this took months of research, right? Now I probably, AI could probably pull it up right now in a few seconds. But so, when you before the internet, that would have been some kind of accomplishment, right? Like, that would have been some kind of interesting knowledge, right? I could say, hey, guess what I've got? I got a list of the ways that all the U.S. presidents died. I'd be like, oh, that's interesting, But I feel like, hey, how did Garfield die, right? But when you're but when you have the internet, then suddenly that's not so interesting anymore, right? Because that's like me saying to you, hey, I know what time it is in Hong Kong right now, and it's just like, well, yeah, so do I, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So once that, so then you see it, now you see it, right? So it just evolves all the way up, so that suddenly then it's like, well, this is what this philosopher thought, and then it's like, okay, well, great. I don't know. I can ask the AI what this other philosopher thought. I mean, so I feel like, as this information becomes so accessible, then suddenly the insights become trivial. And I think that, and I think that's the effect that AI is going to have on it. I think it possibly is already having. Yeah. So that's, I mean, that's not I don't think that that's a good thing. But at the same time, I guess I would say something like this, and I was talking about this with some guests, recently, back in May, I think. But it's also the case, though, that, I mean, you can go down to Home Depot, buy a few things, come back and ask AI, and you can build a water filtration device in your backyard. What I mean? So, so, and maybe these water filtration devices are better for humanity than making sure that we fully understand Kant. I don't know. But
I have to agree with you on this. There is a huge difference between doing the work yourself. The whole process itself has it enriches you. Just the process of that research, studying, reading, everything is an enrichment. Whereas when you just click a button and get the bullet points, you might definitely get the core, but the process that enriches you is lost. I'd say it's like you go out into the farm and pick out a good orange, and you take a bite into it, you get the fiber, you get the juices, the whole experience of walking through the farm, as against just opening a bottle and pulling out a vitamin C capsule and popping it. There's a definite difference.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah. I asked AI, one evening, just for, kicks and grins, I asked AI, I was like, what's the most difficult question that I can come up with off the top of my head? And I asked AI that question, and AI got it right. It was a text-based question. It got it right, and it got it right, in whatever, less than a minute. And, I thought to myself that not only is it the case that, the ability to answer that question is predicated upon a tremendous amount of reading. So I mean, just the amount of time that it would take if AI didn't exist and you were a human being and you were trying to answer that question, the number of pages you would have to read in order to be able to come up with that answer. But not just that, but just, the complicated logic that you would have to work through in order to be able to come up with that answer. And when it answered it in under a minute and it answered it correctly, I thought to myself, that's, you can't compete with it. But it doesn't change, Vin's point is absolutely correct. That development, the development that comes from doing the work, AI is not a substitute for that. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you think we combat this, just kind of the ease of information, and to make sure that we're able to build those muscles and that problem solving and thinking and keep our brains sharp in this stage of society.
You know, I'll give you an analogy. I do a lot of math, right? And uh, even if, I mean, it just, whatever for whatever reason. I mean, even if it's just as simply as, trying to figure out how much to tip a person at, at a coffee shop or something. But I always use the calculator. I mean, I just use the calculator. So I, I just, I don't know. I worry that, I don't know. I hear that some of the younger generations are very much into reading books and rejecting, um, technology, en masse. And, so, maybe it's the case, I don't know. I think it's going to be a strange world, right? That, you know, I don't know. I feel like I mean, I still want to go back and revisit. I feel very interested going back and reading some of the Platonic dialogues again. But, yeah, I mean, you're trying to balance the time and the effort and, yeah, I don't know. I mean, these things were massive. I mean, so I'll give you, an idea. The Kent State University, when I was teaching at Kent State University changed the rules of their library, because of me, because I had over 100 books checked out from the library, and they were in my apartment. They were stacked up on the floor along the walls, and they had a policy at the time where if you had the books out, like I think the most you could check the books out for was 3 months, but then you could renew them for 3 months or something. So anyway, the idea was that I had 118 books checked out for a year. Right? They're like, look, you can't take 118 books from the library and keep them for a year. So, but in truth, I mean, so for example, when I would go to the Critique of Pure Reason, I find that it's the case that there is no one book. I mean, there are some extremely good commentaries on the Critique of Pure Reason, but there is no one book, in my opinion, that you can just go to and open up this book and it's going to just suddenly explain the Critique of Pure Reason to you. So back in the day, so to speak, it would have been the case that you would have had to have had the Critique of Pure Reason in front of you. You would have had to have been trying to read the Critique of Pure Reason and then going to these secondary sources and using them to help you make sense of what you were reading. But that's a massive process, right? Especially when the books are not electronic. You've got to go to the library. You've got to carry those books around. And so I mean, that's right. I mean, if you are sincerely considering, I want to do something, would I like to burn an entire week of my life to do this? And it takes longer than a week, of course. Or would I like to spend 4 minutes doing it? So I don't know. I don't think the prognosis is very good for, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious you having done all of that, what would you look back and say? I mean, what do you feel like has been the greatest benefit from doing that work, and that you wouldn't have achieved, from a Chat GPT?
Maybe you should ask Chat GPT that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's great. Well, what's so funny? What's so funny is that AI has no problem doing this, right? It's like if you ask, if I say to AI, I'm like, hey, AI, I'm going to be on this podcast, and they asked me, how did I get into philosophy? And the AI will say, here's how you got into philosophy. And I'm like, how would you know that? How would you know that? But and I thought the other thing was, if I say, well, here's the paragraph, the narrative that I would put together. If you ask AI to look at that, AI would say, well, I want to change all these things about this paragraph. And it's like, I don't want those things changed. I like layered meanings, and I like illusion, and you know what I mean. And so,
Yeah.
so I guess to answer your question though directly is that the sense in which it's sort of locked in. You know what I mean? Like I think that's you don't have because even now, I mean, I'm using I'm using AI to help me learn some things that are beyond what I would usually be looking at, and it's very helpful. But at the same time, it's like when it just gives me the answer, I feel like I can't really remember it. Like I got to keep going back and being like, "Can you tell me that again?" Like yeah.
Some more memorization than a true
Right.
knowing.
Than a true
Yeah.
knowing. Yes.
Okay.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. But it's real strange though, right? Because I feel like if I had, I mean, it would be like this, right? Like if I had, and there are apps that suggest that they can do this now. But if I had Immanuel Kant with me, right? Like if I had Immanuel Kant right with me right now, and you asked me a question about the Critique of Pure Reason, like I wouldn't be like, hang on, Kant, I got this, buddy. You know what I mean? And then like,
Right.
this is what this guy meant when he wrote that book. I'd be like, hey, why don't you tell us what you meant? So when you get to this point at which AI can take on these personas, can read all these books and then essentially answer as if, if you believe that, answer as if it's that person. I mean, I think it's the end of certain kinds of conversations. It's unfortunate. Yeah.
That's true. I guess there's both sides of the coin, right? You let
Mhm.
AI do the work so that you're free to do other things and you can explore. But at the same time, if you don't do the work, you don't build the necessary muscle. It's like
Mhm.
trying to build a building from the fifth floor without having done the work of the foundation on the first few floors. So there's both sides of the coin. What would be your advice to somebody who is seeking in life and someone who would like some direction? Why and how would philosophy help? And what would be a good place to start? So that's, I guess, two questions.
Great questions. No, great questions. Thank you, Vin. So, I guess I would add, so to answer these questions you just asked, I would add one piece that refers back to the other question, which is that it is still, though, the case that, okay, so quick contextualization here. If you, so I wrote a chapter in a book about this. I talk about this in a lot of my publications whenever I get the chance to reference this. Um, if you're looking at the history of Western philosophy, you have these watershed moments. You really do, and of course, there is a Copernican shift that happens with Kant's philosophy. It's I believe it's the case, though, that transcendental philosophy goes all the way back. That I would argue that in a way Plato is a transcendental philosopher, but it's not explicit until you get to Kant. Okay, so you get to Kant, then suddenly there are these different paths that you can take from Kant, and these paths have solidified into analytic philosophy, continental philosophy, so on and so forth. But really, analytic philosophy, continental philosophy, and you could say the various religious philosophies. The one that we talked about in our book was Thomistic philosophy, the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas, and so you have these different paradigms, right? And when you look at the evolution of these paradigms, there's a couple things that stand out. Analytic philosophy is often referred to as American philosophy. I reject that term, but it is true that the majority of American philosophers are studying what's called analytic philosophy. Even though it's the case that analytic philosophy goes back to Frege, there's still a sense in which there are these Cartesian hangovers. There are these Cartesian distinctions that are lingering inside of analytic philosophy, and then in continental philosophy you get this divide between everything is politics, Hegelian Marxist kind of thinking, and then you get the existentialists and in my opinion the true heirs of Kant's philosophy, and the true continental philosophers. Okay, so having said all of that, the problem is that when you ask AI a question, and I had mentioned this before, when you ask AI a question, AI will give you the analytic answer, right? So yeah, so artificial intelligence is playing to the majority. It is playing to the majority, so I'll give you an example. I've got one of my former roommates is a corporate attorney. He's a corporate lawyer, and super smart guy. One of the smartest, fastest in terms of logic. One of the smartest, fastest logic guys I've ever known in my life. Right, and we were having a chat. We were having a conversation on the phone one day, and he asked me about something, and he said, "Hey, I just Googled it real quick, and I just put it into ChatGPT, and this is the answer that I got." Right, because he and I are always talking about whether or not artificial intelligence is going to take over for lawyers, right? If it's going to, if lawyers are going to sort of continue to sort of go away. But so when he looked this up, so we're talking about it. This is a very smart guy, very sharp logician. He looks this up and it gives him the answer, and he says, "Oh, well, this is the answer." And he fully accepted that answer, right? He was like, "Yeah, this is the answer." And I said, "Well, that's actually not the answer. And the reason that's not the answer is because that's the Cartesian answer, but the real answer is this." And so the problem being is that even though technically the answer that AI gave is consistent and is coherent with analytic philosophy, I would argue it's the wrong answer. But once you take away the labor to get there, once you take away this new habit of just accepting whatever the artificial intelligence oracle tells me, then there's a sense in which that's it. You just accept it, So I do think that is a problem. So I think that there is truly this trade-off between time and labor, but I think it's also a problem that it does give you wrong answers. And now I think I've forgotten the other part of the question. I apologize, Vin.
Oh, that's okay. You did cover everything. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. It was beautifully covered. You have this incredible reservoir of knowledge that you just dip into, and you're like an onion. The more one peels it, you find layers and layers. It's fabulous. I'm so enjoying this conversation and enriched by it. I have to appreciate you. What about questions from you? Do you have any questions or anything you would like to, that, what is it that you're grappling with today?
Yeah.
What is the philosophical question that you are wrestling with today? Anything at all.
Yeah. No. I appreciate that very much, sincerely. And this has been such a wonderful conversation with the two of you. Thank you so much. I very much enjoy your presence and your energy. So thank you.
Same.
Yeah, sincerely. I am so where to, how to get a grip on where I'm at these days. So I'm just going to say something that maybe it's going to not make any sense, but I'll try to double back and clear it up. But so I'm very much interested in, okay, so I think sometimes about lots of people have talked about, I think it's called Flatland. It was written at the end of the 1800s. And it's like a mathematical exercise that you can go through to think about the difference between dimensions. And I love that as an exercise. I used to use it in the classroom all the time because it helps people understand these gestalt, like extra dimensional, like how do you think about an extra dimensional reality and stuff like that. So, but we talked about this earlier. So I'm thinking about if spirit, right? If spirit, if I am some kind of body, mind, and spirit, and if spirit is extra dimensional, spirit is connected with source, if you want to, I'm trying to use these generic terms, right? That if spirit is connected with source, and if it's the case that so two things, right? On the one hand, when this body dies, I will still be connected with source. So I'm wondering about this. I'm wondering about this transformation or transition at the point at which the body dies. I'm wondering about that. And then I'm also thinking about, so I'm thinking about that. I had always tended to think about this in sort of Christian soteriological terms, but I recently, and hey, these, how these things, some things just they just show up, right? And so I had been thinking about this spirit in terms of a Buddha field, right? And so so this is why one day I was just, I don't know, I was listening to, I love to listen to the Diamond Sutra. Sometimes I just listen to the Diamond Sutra over and over again. I also listen to the Zen Mind Beginner's Mind. I just keep it on repeat and just listen to it over and over again. And at some point I just said to myself, I have to study the question, what is the Dharma? What is the Dharma? And then I found that there's a book called What is the Dharma? And it's such a great book. But so anyway, to get back to the question. So if it's the case that, and I believe this, but if it's the case that the extra dimensionality of spirit causes spirit to relate to time differently, right? So the body relate, right? Yeah. Okay. No problems, right? The body relates to time one way, spirit relates to it differently. And, and so you talk about these, what's it like to be in these Buddha fields and time passing in these Buddha fields. But then there's this question of how time is passing in these Buddha fields, right? That there's some sense. I'll just say it, that there's some sense in which I'm in both places, right? I'm in both places at the same time, right? So I'm fascinated by this. But so anyway, so I'm listening to the Shobo Genzo, and as I'm listening to the Shobo Genzo, and we're talking about, you could articulate it in terms of like a gate, right? If I'm passing through a gate from this embodiment, passing through a gate into a Buddha field, then the question, as I'm listening to the Shobo Genzo, I believe it was the Shobo Genzo. Maybe it was what I'm just juggling these books all the time, but I believe it was as I was listening to the Shobo Genzo, Dogen asks this question, and in the background is the question of attachment, right? And desire and the cessation of desire. And he asks this question, are you looking forward to passing through that gate? And I think I was outside blowing leaves with the leaf blower, and it stopped me in my tracks, and I was like, he got me, because I absolutely am looking forward to passing through that gate, and perhaps that's not the appropriate way to pass through that gate, right? And being in both places at the same time, then suddenly I was like, the lights were on in a different way. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I went through the day. I just felt lighter. I just felt better. You know what I mean? Like I just was, I don't know. It just kind of clicked for me. I was stuck and attached to this idea of like, well, it'll be better then. It'll be better then. It'll be better then, and then suddenly it's like, oh no, wait a minute. What? Yeah. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's something I also have been thinking about in a lot of depth. And I have a view. I'm happy to share it with you if you like.
I would love to hear it. Yeah.
If you take the Christian theory, after death, your spirit goes to heaven or hell.
Mhm.
If you take the Hindu theory, that you get reincarnated, or if you've evolved to an extent, then you get liberated. That is, you become one with the larger energy, which is God. Or if you take even an agnostic or other atheist system, that there's going to be nothing.
Sure.
You just dissipate and become nothing. My theory holds true, takes all of these into consideration. And the theory is that
Excellent.
at the moment of death, right now I am Vinod Nair, and my mind is unique to my physical composition. Like I
Mhm.
am autistic. I don't know if my spirit will be an autistic spirit, but right now
Interesting.
my mind is clearly autistic because it's wired to my physical body, right?
Mhm.
Now, at the moment of death, that microsecond as my body dies and my spirit is about to leave, whether it goes to heaven or hell, or whether it gets reincarnated, or it goes into nothing, in all cases, there would be this nanosecond, microsecond, where the body dies and the spirit is just there before it goes in any direction, right? That micro nanosecond. At that point of time, when I exist as an energy, but I'm still Vinod Nair, I'm still me, but now the laws of regular physics may not apply to me.
Mhm.
Gravity, time may not apply at all. So for that nanosecond where I'm still Vinod Nair before I dissipate or reincarnate or go into heaven and hell, I could exist in a space where time does not matter to me and place does not matter to me. So even if I go into nothing, or I get reincarnated, or I go to heaven and hell, for that nanosecond, I can exist across time and space forever. So while I may go into heaven or hell, or I may reincarnate, I can actually be around here forever and in any place, anytime I choose, because that nanosecond is enough for me to exist forever, wherever I want, is a thought that I'm considering
That's
deeply.
beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, that
The
that
Venn theory.
that resonates.
Considering,
Yeah, that resonates with me deeply. Yeah, it resonates with me deeply. Yeah. It makes me think of also of like beatitude, right? So it's like so if you take when if you take transcendental philosophy, and I've been talking a lot about just the psychological aspect of transcendental philosophy, but if you take the theological aspect of transcendental philosophy, this idea that that source, God, whatever, however one is comfortable referring to it, that it uh, it is, for example, the condition for the possibility of all goodness, of all embodied goodness, but it's also the condition for the possibility of all embodied beauty. And so therefore it is the beautiful in itself. It is the good in itself. And so then suddenly you are entered into a more pure relation to the beautiful, the form of the
Mhm.
beautiful, or the beautiful in itself. And so that experience is like a beatitude. I mean, this sense of wondering, will I be reunited with loved ones? Like, will I miss someone, and these sorts of things? And I think that in the presence of God, for lack of a better way to put it, that in the presence of this
Mhm.
more full spirit, in the presence of this Buddha field, or the revelation of this Buddha field, I think that all of that just sort of dissolves away. But I love the way that you put it. So it is kind of like a beatitude, but I love the way that you put it in terms of time. Yeah, that you are everywhere and forever. Yeah, it's very beautiful.
thank you. Thank you.
I did have another
You sure?
thought. It might be a little off track, but
Please.
so the tagline that you have for Philosophemes is so deep roots, dangerous ideas. Yes?
Yes, yeah.
Have that
And
right?
so
Okay.
where we're at right now is Deep Roots, Dangerous Ideas, the canon remastered. That's where
The
we are
canon
right now. Yeah,
remastered.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm really curious to learn more about this, especially like the dangerous ideas and where that comes from, and if there's been any like philosophical questions that you found particularly risky.
Yeah, that sounds like a loaded cannon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent. That's excellent. That is really excellent. That didn't light up for me before, but now I've got it. That's awesome. Thank you, Vin. Thank you. Yeah, so my experience, my experience with this has been, so I guess let me take a quick step back, is that, so when I was teaching, in the classroom, again, you talk about, technology and how technology changes these things, right? But it's like when I'm present with a group of people, it's the same thing as when I'm doing group therapy, right? Is that you can feel the energy. I mean, I feel like I can feel your energy through this technology, but if you weren't present, right? Like if I was pre-recording this, I would not be able to feel your energy, right? And
Right.
so I feel like when I'm in the classroom or when I'm in group therapy, I can feel the energy of the other people, and I can real time relate to that energy. But when I'm pre-recording things, I'm kind of just left with my own internal assumed audience, right, so to speak. And so what I found was something like this, right, was that um, when I transitioned into this world of podcasting and like creating educational videos and educational content, there were some people who were already in this space and who have PhDs in philosophy, and I assumed that we would be very friendly with each other. I just assumed, hey, you're doing this, I'm doing this. Maybe we can work together on this. I was
Yeah,
talking to, I was talking to a guy in
absolutely.
finance, and I was talking to a guy in finance, and his comment was, he says, I think at this level, it's all for one and one for all. You know what I mean? Like we should work together and benefit each other any way that we can, and
Yes.
I was like, I agree. I think it's a great philosophy, right? And then, but what I found was that some of the people in these spaces were extremely hostile, just extremely hostile, right? They were very aggressive and very hostile, and so much so that one of these content creators, I went over and I stand by this. I've said this before. I thought I was agreeing with this person. I genuinely thought I was agreeing with. I was like, I basically thought I was saying, "Hey, that's a great idea. I agree with you." And this
Yeah.
person came back and just went bananas on me. You know what I mean? Just being as hostile as possible to me, trying to make it personal and everything. And I thought, wow, is that the space that we're in here? And this is why I loved and I do love your idea of Socratic Satsang. And just I believe that you have the correct approach to this, right? But so anyway, what I found was that it's exactly like Vin said earlier. I found one of two things. Either people who feel as though their expertise is being challenged, and so they immediately respond with
Mm,
hostility, right? Or people, on the other hand, as Vin noted, that people who immediately think that you are pushing some kind of political agenda, and if they think it's
mhm.
not their political agenda, then they are pushing back with hostility. And so then you're kind of in the middle with both sides being hostile towards you. So anyway, so one of the things I found is that, again, you can't, it's just not possible to appease everyone. And so what I found was that I would want to talk about something, and then other people would say, for example, um, quick example, uh, I I was involved in a philosophy of technology project, and I was just trying to draw attention to what I was referring to in general terms as technological mediation. One of the things that I found, I came to social media as at a very late age, right? Like I'd been in the world for a long time before social media existed. And one of the things that I found was that I remember I was living and studying abroad in Paris, and I was trying to send all these photos that I was taking of Paris back to my family. And it was taking so much time at night to send all these emails that I thought, you know what? I'm going to get Facebook. This is how I got Facebook. Like, I'm going to get Facebook, and then I'm just going to post all of these pictures on Facebook, and then people can go look at them themselves. And then I won't spend hours when I could be, eating a baguette or something. Right. So drinking some of that cheap wine that was wonderful and delicious, right? But so anyway, I found that then as I was walking around Paris, I would think to myself, I should take a picture of that so I can post it. And I thought to myself, what a fascinating process, how this social media. So now I'm no longer right. The social media is now mediating my relation to reality. Like I'm not thinking, what a beautiful building. What is the history of this building? What a beautiful tree, whatever. I'm not thinking these things anymore. I'm thinking, how is my experience of the environment? How does it relate to how does my experience of the environment relate to social media? Like there's some sense in which social media has sort of hijacked my experience. And yeah, so anyway, I was talking about this idea of technological mediation, and one of the examples that I was trying to give was I used the example of and forgive me, I hope I'm not out of bounds here, right? But I used the example of a vasectomy, right? And I said a vasectomy is a kind of technological mediation, and that it changes your relation to the environment and to others, right? I mean, I'm not saying that if you get a vasectomy, you become, whatever, but I'm just saying that if you get a vasectomy, that then suddenly, as Aristotle would say, the natural functions, right? That it alters the natural function of the natural body. And so again, hey, I'm just stating this in general. I'm not saying that this is good or bad or anything. I'm just saying that it's a thing, right? It's a thing. But then what happens is that then you get people who are like, oh, well, this guy's talking about vasectomies. Like this isn't a very Christian thing for him to be talking about. I'm not going to listen to him. Right. And that's what I mean. So then suddenly it's like, well, you can't, they're not letting me cook. You know what I mean? Like I can't get off the ground because, everybody just immediately judges, oh, I know what this is about and I don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I'm sorry that you feel that way. But so that's where the dangerous ideas came from, right? So it's like, well, I'm talking about some things that some people are going to consider dangerous ideas, but, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I was very interested. I love true crime. I spend a ton of time with true crime. I mean, we spend, yeah. It's so funny. That's great. Well, it's so funny, the similarities. It's so funny because Molly got me into the true crime. I liked it before, but it's like a religion for her, But so, yeah, but so I wanted to do some philosophy and true crime podcast stuff because people love true crime, and I thought, well, this is one way to teach philosophy and get a philosophical angle on it. But then again, it's like the politics of all of that stuff, you know what I mean? And are you exploiting these people and that, so I've kind of backed away from that as well. But anyway, yes, the idea is that yeah, I have off the top of my head, do you remember what is the first part of that tagline? I can't even remember the first. Deep roots. Thank you. Yeah, deep.
I got you.
I'm glad you could remind me of my tagline. But yeah, so deep roots, dangerous ideas, the canon remastered. Yeah. So, yeah. But I think one of the things I was trying to do is I was trying to make this not so academic, but I think that in hindsight, there's still so much academic stuff in there. I'm actually considering, this is not a question you asked, but I'll just throw this out there. What I'm actually considering doing is making a different podcast and not even saying my name. Just being completely anonymous. And I'm going to say that and I'm going to say the podcast it's performance art.
Oh, smart.
Yep.
Nice.
And that
smart.
It has to, we're going to touch on topics of philosophy. We're going to be touching on topics of this, that, and the other, but this is just a performance. I'm putting on a performance, and you can be entertained by it, learn from it or not. It's up to you. But yeah, that way I'm just like, I'm not in a box right out of the gun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, it's sad because, right, philosophy should be that spot, that place, that safe space where you can explore all of these different ideas without judgment.
True.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've run out of questions. If there's anything, Dr. Frank, you'd like to say or ask or just put forth, we are all ears.
I think you had kind of asked me something along the lines of like, how do I feel as though I've made a contribution or something like that? And I said, I think that my existentialism book is probably my best contribution. The reason that I say that is because um, before that book was published, it was only published 4 years ago, but before that book was published, you had basically all the experts in around the world, and this is as evidenced by quotes that I've taken out of Oxford University texts and the Cambridge Companion, even the Cambridge Companion to Existentialism. These people say there's no such thing as existentialism, and so I recognize that sometimes my prose is difficult to read, but the reason that I answered your question that way in the email was because I really do believe that I have answered that question, and that it took me. I had been working on that question since the 1990s, so to finally, sincerely, so to have finally settled on an answer, and I really do think that it holds water. I think that it's solid. I feel as though that's a contribution, and people are already now starting to refer to it as though that is the answer, and it's kind of a foregone conclusion. Yeah, of course that's the answer, kind of thing, which makes me very happy. So anyway,
Wow.
if you do want to give a link to that book, I think that the book is readable. Yeah, I think it's readable, but it does get heavy fast. But anyway,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
We will provide a link.
Yeah.
I tell you, if you're ever looking for something fun to do in your satsang,
Yeah.
reading Plato's Phaedo together, I think that when Vin shared his beautiful ideas regarding death with us, I think that you would find a lot of harmony and resonance with Plato's Phaedo. Yeah, and I would highly recommend also. I love the Republic. The Republic is a real commitment, but book 10, if you so of course book 7 and book 10 of Plato's Republic, but those would be if you're ever looking to read something with your group and just talk about it in
Great
general.
idea.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend. The Phaedo, and I can email you some of these things as well. I love the idea of teaching and learning Kant, but it's so difficult to climb into that space by way of the books, right? Because I think it presupposes so much early modern philosophy knowledge. Like you kind of, Kant explicitly says, I'm taking Locke and I'm combining Locke with Leibniz. So it's like, if you don't know Locke and you don't know Leibniz, then, that's a difficult statement. And, Kant will say, this is how, what I'm saying right here, this is how it relates to Descartes, but it's really much greater than Descartes. So I don't know I haven't settled on a recommendation for the Critique of Pure Reason. If anybody wants to pick up the Critique of Pure Reason and try to give it a read, I would recommend the Geyer Cambridge translation. That's the I think the Kemp Smith one is the free one that's floating around, but the Geyer one, the Cambridge translation, the cover is blue. I think that's the probably the best, and the introduction to that book is very great, very wonderful as well. But Plato is. Plato is divine. I would start with Plato, and that would be a lot of fun to just talk about the Phaedo and a couple books out of the Republic. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
We should do it.
Thank you. We'll do it.
Yeah,
we'll
that'd be fun.
definitely get together on that. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been such a, should I say, a nutritious conversation.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful.
A true orange, a real orange.
A real orange.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
Walking barefoot in the field.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that, because I actually have been, there's some lines from Keats that, for whatever reason, it was in my head the other day about being barefoot in flowers, standing in flowers in your bare feet. I don't know why but that just kept going through my head the last few days. But yeah. So.
Oh, love it.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and hey, maybe down the road we can do something like this again or something. I just really enjoyed
I was
this.
thinking like a part 2 would be fun at some point. Yeah.
Yes,
thank you very
sure.
much. Yeah, this was really fun. It was wonderful.
There are more layers to the onion for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.